Hello and welcome back to the Starving Artist Podcast, episode 14. I got the episode number wrong on the last episode, so I'm rectifying that now. And I'm delighted to be here with the wonderful Stanley Morgan. Stanley, thank you for joining us, mate.
Thank you for having me.
How are you today?
It's funny because we were speaking before this, and
Mm-hmm.
I realized I had because we did a meditation just now,
Mm-hmm.
and I realized I hadn't asked you how you were yet. And so during the meditation, I was thinking about that. And then it's such an interesting question, because I'm in a foreign country right now, and a lot of people only speak certain phrases of English. And so
Right.
there's a lot of how are you? Have a nice day. So you hear these
Mm-hmm.
sort of social
Yeah.
um
Etiquette.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
basically. Yeah.
And um I never quite know how to answer.
Mm.
But I'd say today I feel I'd felt out of alignment for quite a few days.
Mm.
And even just having this conversation or the preparation for this conversation has sort of brought me back into alignment with things that I feel drawn to. So
Mm.
I actually do feel I feel good. How do you
Good.
feel?
I'm good. It's interesting you say that because it is interesting how often how rarely we ground ourselves sometimes and kind of come back to, oh, actually, how am I feeling? Because
Mm.
especially in the society we live in, we're kind of constantly doing something or
Mm.
told we should be doing something. Yeah, I'm well. I am, as I said before, though, we just listened to something from Consolations, which is a collection by David Whyte on honesty. And he
Mm.
said that honesty comes through grief and loss. And I think I'm in a grieving process. And I was saying to you that I only realized that through the part I'm currently playing and working on, which is one of the many benefits of, I think, acting is the catharsis you can get through it. It can be dangerous at times, but yeah. So tell me, I'd be interested to know. I wasn't going to ask this, but if
Mm.
you're allowed to say what you're currently working on and kind of the themes around that, what are you? How is the character you're currently working on affecting your well-being?
Yeah. Yeah, I will answer that. I'm also gonna just sort of flag what you've said
Of
about
course.
grief. I want to know more about that.
Mm.
And maybe um I'll find a way to sort of segue that.
Yeah, of
But
course.
I don't know if I can say what I'm working on, only because it's not been sort of announced yet. But I'm
Yeah.
working on it's it's a show, it's a TV show about a royal family in the 1500s.
Mm.
And it's really about that, about family, about identity in a lot of ways, uh about power, but in all the senses of that word, why what power is, but also why people seek power.
Hmm.
And I think that's actually the root of the show is everyone is pursuing power for a different reason.
Yeah.
For some, it's to solve well, for all of them, as we know, it's to solve some internal.
Yeah. Conflict.
Yeah, exactly. Which is great storytelling when someone feels that something will solve an internal conflict.
Hmm.
And on the journey to pursuing that thing, they not only find that it doesn't, but they find what actually does. And it's
Yeah.
if someone can, um, I love watching characters at the moment where they realize the thing they've been pursuing isn't the thing that's going to bring them what they truly need. And if they
Mm.
have the courage to turn back around the path they've been walking for so long,
Mm.
and they're identified with that path, and they've they've become
Yeah.
the person that walks that path. Which,
It's my life story, honestly. My sort of genesis through my 20s. Sort of,
thank you, grandiose words.
yeah, I know, but it is quite a universal thing, isn't it? And it's a terrifying thing of thinking, oh, well, and it's a very dangerous thing to think, well, if I get this, but then everything will be okay. And it must be, and you see these stories all the time about famous people. It's like you get there, and then what? And that must be such a terrifying, empty feeling that you've kind of pursued this thing thinking it would solve all your internal issues. And I think the truth is that nothing external will solve your issues. And that's another scary thought.
Yeah, or perhaps the idea of solving issues itself is the thing that's wrong.
Yeah.
Seeing them as issues as opposed to part of the foundations in which you're made up. Um, I do think that's interesting. I want to talk about what you said about grief and what
Mm.
you're learning from your current character, and then that might
Yeah,
elicit
of course.
my own.
So I'm working on, I haven't, it's the first play I've done since last summer, and it's one that is very, it resonated with me quite deeply immediately. I did a rehearsed reading of it last year and sort of actually kind of broke down on stage. Thankfully, it worked for the character, but it was like it was this little crack in the armor that I didn't quite expect. And it is a play where the main theme is grief, but it's made me reflect on that I'm not that grief isn't simply grieving for a person or a loss of someone in your life. That can be one of the most, profound types of grief. But I think I'm grieving goes back to what we were saying, the life I thought I wanted and the life I kind of, at 18, bright-eyed young thing going off to LAMDA thinking that I wanted, and then things just went. I don't know if you know much of my story, but I had to.
Yeah, I don't. And if
No.
you mind sharing,
Yeah, of course. Of
yeah.
course. So I was 18 when I got into LAMDA, and I think I was ready as an actor, but completely unprepared as a human being. I I had a lot of sort of mental health issues that were unaddressed. I didn't even know what they were at the time. And by the third year, I started my third year and was cast as Macbeth. But I was fucked at that point. I was just, I'd been sleeping sort of 2 to 4 hours a night for 3 years. My anxiety levels were through the roof. I didn't know what that was at the time. I remember going to hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack, not knowing that it was a panic attack. And I left. And when I left, my entire sense of identity completely shattered. It also coincided with a lot of other things. I got home and my parents' marriage was breaking down, and the girl that I was sort of in love with at the time, because of what was happening, we went our separate ways. And it was just like everything I thought I was and had used as my outward identity up until then, completely in a week shattered. And sort of the fallout from that was that I still didn't really know what was wrong with me, so I didn't do the things that I have subsequently done that would be healthy, which is figure out what's wrong with me and work through them. I turned to drugs, which is kind of my story, up until a few years ago has been a big part of my story, drugs and alcohol. And so I just numbed it and went back to LAMDA, and it just got progressively worse. I leaned on that crutch for more than I should. And by the final I managed to graduate, but in the final term I went to rehab because I was just fucked again. And then it's, so I had this big lead role at the start of the third year with, some of the biggest agents in the country coming. I thought, this is it, this is the ticket, this is more than I could have ever dreamed of. And then it all shattered all at once. And I think in a way, actually, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, because if I had just carried on and got some massive agent and been on a film set, I'd have then had a nervous breakdown on a film set and never worked again, kind of thing. So as long as the process has been, and as completely different to how I thought it would be, it's made me finally go, okay, what's wrong with me? I need to do something about it. And that's kind of been the last 6-7 years of my life. So I think I'm grieving family. I don't feel I have a family unit anymore. I think I'm grieving the loss of romance in certain, my romantic life has been a bit topsy-turvy, because it's hard to be in a romantic relationship when you're a drug addict and alcoholic, because that is your relationship. There's not much room for anything else.
Yeah.
And
also what it can, I was thinking about what you said in terms of using drugs and alcohol as a crutch. At that point when you return to LAMDA, And I think I have so many questions about you know, what you said, because it's when someone's, it's quite hard to talk about certain periods of life, because naturally we have to go. And then I did 3 years at LAMDA, and then it was in my third year, and I'm going, what about
Yeah, hold on.
the
There's a big old 2.5 year gap there.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's the thing of what drugs and alcohol, and we've spoken a little bit about this, not now, of that those things have had an impact on my life, my upbringing. Not me personally, but
Yeah.
people I really love and care about have had um struggles with those things. And so I was really aware of that from a young age. And it's about what it actually doesn't allow you to feel that can really when you're saying about a romantic relationship, it's at the heart of a good relationship is about vulnerability and
Completely.
the mess of you. And it really inhibits you from being able to feel anything in
Yeah.
a way. That's that was my experience, or at least my experience of being around people who were struggling with that.
It,
Because yeah, go ahead.
it's sort of I found it was a constant attempt to numb myself, and I didn't realize quite how much I'd been doing it until I stopped it, and then realized at 27 this is possibly the first time I've ever sat with my emotions properly.
And
you
does
know
that make it harder in a way, because you're trying to numb, and then so you're so much further away from the experience of feeling your own feelings, that when you then have to stop, it must just feel like
oh
this is
it's
definitely
yeah
not the right thing, because I feel so much worse for having done it. And then you have to sort of
yeah
invert thinking and go, no, the bad is good. And
Yeah, I mean, well, that's why it's so hard and why there's such a small success rate for rehab and things like that. And I'm in a 12-step program, which has helped me, but, I see so many people come and go because it is just this tsunami of
mm,
grief and coming back. And it's a practice like anything else to sit with it. But you do notice that as you sit with it, those emotions pass quicker and you can actually process them. Whereas with substances, you cannot process them and you're just adding more issues on top of it. It's interesting to talk to you as you shared, from the other side of witnessing
mm,
loved ones who've gone through it.
yeah.
What has your experience been like with that? Because I think one of the really heartbreaking things about addiction and alcoholism is you're I imagine you feel kind of helpless because until someone is fully had enough and ready to kind of, I need help,
Mm.
there's not a lot you can do for them. The interventions and all this, I have, yeah, it's difficult.
I've done those, yeah. um it's funny. I'm sure the experiences are drastically different, but in some ways really similar, because I think you go through I think age is really important. It was something that I was aware of from a very young age. And so I think you go through your own period of numbing, where you
Mm,
have to, as when you're quite young, it's quite scary. And so you're trying to fix it, or you're trying to do what you can to stop this happening. Because I think, especially with alcohol, you feel like someone's disappeared. And what I do, I don't want to ascribe it to anyone else, but I definitely felt and feel like the person that I really love and want to spend time with has now gone,
mhm.
and I'm with this intoxicated person.
Yeah.
And especially when you're young, it's I developed this thing of, well, there's no point of me engaging with you right now, because
Mhm.
this experience isn't being logged anywhere. And
Completely. Yeah.
I'm gonna try, you'll have like, and it only takes a few real, you have like a moment where you go, oh, that was amazing. And then you realize they aren't gonna remember this.
Yeah.
It only takes a few of those before you start just slightly retreating and going, I don't want to have that feeling again. It's a sort of strange feeling where you go, oh, we're not having the same experience. because for me, this is an amazing open moment. And for you, you're actually connecting emotionally to a drug of
Yeah.
some kind. And I'm
Yeah.
just here to
Hmm.
watch it. Um,
Yeah.
so I think you have to go through your own numbing of it, or at least I did, to be able to handle it. I had to numb myself to what was actually happening. And I think I'm still going through a
Mm.
period of, is thawing the right word, where you sort of
Thawing. I
is that
like.
unfreezing, or is that,
Unfreezing. Yeah. 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 It's
yeah,
slowly coming back to temperature. Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
defrosting.
The defrost.
Let's go with
You've
that.
taken yourself out of the freezer.
Yeah, yeah, and trying to actually go work out what it was I was feeling during those points, because it bleeds over. So you
Mm.
suddenly become, that becomes your coping for any uh fearful or scary or sad experience. You now have this room you can go to where you can shut all the doors and windows and not connect.
Mm-hmm.
And on a, on a purely selfish level, as an artist, that's death. But
Yeah.
on on a on a personal level, that's, it's also, you know um it cuts you off from we were just listening to something about grief before we started, and about loss, and it cuts you off from so much experience if you're not allowing yourself to, and I'm saying this to myself whilst reminding myself of this, because I still do it, but it it stops you from being able to engage with life wholly,
Mm.
and miss out on so much by protecting yourself from what you think you're protecting yourself from.
Absolutely. And that is, it's interesting to hear that from someone who has witnessed it and dealt with the fallout of witnessing it, because that is easily as the same description as what alcohol did for me, which is create this cocoon that where I didn't have to, it was horrible and it was shit, but it was less scary than real life. It's like no one could reach in here and touch me. And it's why I think, from what you described, why there's this big debate around how much of alcoholism is genetic and how much is, I personally think there is a genetic element, but often it's trauma based. And it's why often, children of alcoholics sometimes become alcoholics, because if you're witnessing an alcoholic parent at such a fundamental stage in your development, it's bound to traumatize you. So it's amazing that you are thawing, as you say, and
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
figure out those emotions. Mm.
Well, I think it's, yeah, I definitely see it as something I'm really, in a strange way, grateful for. I think I'm sure there's some part of that that makes it also easier to deal with, but I think it's it exposed me to so many things at such a young age,
Mhm.
that I now feel that I sort of had to contend with and struggle with, that, and this is true for everyone, for so many things, and just my experience of this particular problem, and it exposed me to so many things that I feel I grew up quicker in a sense, or
Mhm.
um had to had to contend with things at an age where I now feel really grateful for
Yeah.
that. And it was never something I was ever, because I don't really drink, and I've never done drugs, and so it's, and that I'm really grateful for too.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's part of why I went into acting as well, was that um safe place where I could explore emotions without them having to be, at the time, what I thought were connected to me. And it was like, oh no, I'm not feeling sad. This character's feeling sad.
Mm.
Whereas now, my process, the evolution of my process, is really realizing how much of it is me. And
Yeah.
um that being an amazing thing, and being
Mm.
really happy about that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
This is quite a personal question, so you can veto it if not. But I find myself that, because it sounds, obviously different circumstances, but similar thing. I think I had to grow up quickly. I saw a lot of pain and trauma in my own family, that I kind of became a caregiver almost at a young age. And I think I am grateful for certain things of it. And as similarly, I grew up very quickly. But I am left with a sense of innate sadness in a way that
Mm.
you know, I think is one of the reasons I went into acting, is because I can exercise that,
Yeah.
and I can understand myself through the characters I play. But
Mm.
has that, I mean, everything leaves a mark, right? Do you find that there is, no matter how much you're working through it, that
Mm.
that is still a part of you? Because it's got to leave some sense of sadness.
Yeah.
Big question, I know. I'm sorry.
No, no, don't apologize. It's what we're here for, right? I think my experience of it has been one of, like I said, I'm immensely grateful for, because all of the people I really admire and all of the people that I am drawn towards have really similar experiences.
Mm,
Um, People in my family who are incredibly wise or have experienced things, they're the ones who have the teachings that I seek.
mm,
And you can feel when someone is speaking from a book as opposed to when someone is speaking from an experience. And all of the people that I grew up around that I really admired and I really respected had similar um, experiences in either their childhood or their upbringing. And I think, especially when we're dealing with acting and we're dealing with characters, my biggest realization is that no one no one escapes unscathed through
no.
childhood.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe reframing the conversation around um this idea of a perfect childhood, I think can actually, even the idea of um I think that's a good way of putting it, of a perfect childhood, because I think that can become a a sort of mountaintop, or an idea of something that anyone who feels like they didn't can develop resentment or can feel like they missed out on
Mm,
something. But I know people who have had quote unquote amazing childhoods, and that's part of their if we want to take it to acting, their sort of the root problem for their character. I
mhm,
always think um I was exposed to like some really great teachings about acting from different periods of my life, and one of the really good ones was working out your character's sort of root problems they're trying to solve. And
mhm,
I know people who were loved too much. They were,
mm. Yeah.
they were the what's the idea, the devouring mother idea,
Yeah,
is,
just being coddled. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and that can be an issue. And I think it's just, I see things, and I guess this is part of acting, as not seeing any of it as good or bad, just sort of is, and
Mm,
then seeing how people then navigate what is in in the pursuit of trying to resolve something, I think.
mm,
Um, and so yeah, for me, I've never seen it as, I definitely am prone to periods of sort of introspection, or periods of isolation. I definitely do that.
yeah,
But
same.
yeah, and I
Mm,
I think but I think that's to be expected from artists, because, and I don't even want to frame it just as artists, because anyone who's in the pursuit of anything, I feel there is a question they're trying to um, solve. And that's kind of why I wanted to, at some point, ask you, about this conversation we're having, of wondering what it is that we are collectively trying to
mm.
find through this conversation. Because I'm not sure I have a huge amount to contribute to sort of the lineage of acting
Yeah.
teaching or anything like that, or
Mm,
any sort of expertise. But I
mm,
wonder if we were talking, and I could definitely engage with um trying to find answers, or perhaps trying to find the right words for questions,
mm.
maybe.
Yeah, I think one thing I found through this podcast and the blog that I started with it was born out of a need for vulnerability. I'd spent so long in my life being ashamed of certain elements of my past, and keeping those things in the dark, they fester, whereas bringing them to the light, I found, has actually been so liberating, and it's like, oh, it's a weight off my shoulders. I don't have to pretend anymore. And so I think it doesn't matter that we're probably not going to change the course of acting history in the process of the next hour and a half. But I do think there is a power in having a vulnerable conversation. And also, as we were just talking about, you know, you say you gravitate to people who have had maybe trauma in their lives. And I think if we could figure out as a society that trauma is possibly the one thing that bonds us, whether it's big T trauma or small T trauma, so many issues would be solved. I think I had a friend recently who said something brilliant. We were talking about kind of conversations around race and things, and it was, she said that you can't relate on a level of direct experience, but you can relate on a basis of trauma. We've both been through trauma on something, so that's a starting point. As you say, framing questions, how do we start this conversation?
Yeah.
So I guess in a roundabout way, that's kind of what I'm going for. And I think learning about people, it's interesting having a conversation with someone I don't know, and immediately we've you know, shared quite a bit, and I think that's a powerful thing. You know,
I agree.
it's going against the norm.
I think so. But I think, yeah, it all comes back to, we will get into this, I'm sure. And it's what's on the forefront of my mind at the minute, because that's what I'm doing, is acting. And so that's the avenue through which I'm sort of expressing so much of what I'm thinking and feeling, even if it's a small way that no one's going to know. I'm trying to sort of sneak, you know, personal reflections into what I'm doing. And I think that the first port of call when you're working on a character is what are they, what is their problems that they feel they're trying to solve? You know, what are the wounds? That's where I go straight away, because that's how I also feel like I can connect. And I think I agree with you, where I don't really know how, if I, you know, when you have conversations with people and within minutes they're like, oh, so what do you do? And you sort of, the social game is, let's exchange accolades. And so, oh, I work for this and I do this. Oh, cool. Well, okay, I've got to try and one up you now somehow.
Yeah, it's especially, I think, prevalent with actors.
Oh my God.
I immediately, it's not that I don't relate, I just wish when I say to an actor, oh, how are you? And the first thing they say, I'm good. I'm going up for a thing and I just did this. And it's like, that's not actually what I asked you. It's like, and I actively try not to do that when someone asks me, another actor says, how are you? I kind of don't go straight to work, because I fell into the trap of completely identifying myself with being an actor, and in an industry that can be so random sometimes. If you're doing that, it's no stable grounds for peace and serenity, a peaceful life.
And I think the way you just said that you navigate that really reflects what I've been thinking about, in the sense of, instead of, you know, you pose a question to someone, how are you? And they're going to take that question in whatever headspace they're in at the time. And you don't have time to say to someone, and maybe you do, and maybe this would be really cool as well, but it might be quite confrontational to go, how are you? And I really mean, how are you? I don't mean sell yourself, you know, give me the 1 minute pitch of your life at the moment. What you can do is, when someone asks you, you can answer in a way that might liberate them. And that's what I've learned most from people, is when I see someone navigate a situation, as opposed to them telling me how to do it, when I actually can see it, and someone answers a question in a way where, because there's a difference between someone telling you and them actually doing it themselves, because you see someone put themselves in the potential firing line of awkwardness, or, you know, getting the social cue wrong. And I learn a lot from that, when someone answers a question sincerely or honestly. And if we're being totally honest, there isn't always space and time for it. And that was why I was umming and ahhing, not about talking to you, but about talking to you in a way that's recorded, because these kinds of conversations, I think, so for me, conversation can be so much dictated by the person you're speaking to, you know, the way that you speak and the way that you convey a message is different depending on the ears that it's falling on.
Completely.
And how do you have a conversation that might then be listened to by other people?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it's a bit like acting. You just speak to the person you're speaking to,
Yeah.
and worry less about because the way I convey a message about acting to you is very different to how I would speak to a member of my family or a friend who doesn't
Mm-hmm.
know. In the same
Yeah.
way that, if I say to a doctor, my heart is, I've got a pain in my chest, he's probably just going to go, oh, because
Myocarditis. Yeah.
yeah. He's not going to say, all of the technical medical
Yeah.
terms
Yeah.
because this valve is this, and
Yeah. Yeah.
he's just
Mm.
going to go, did you have 2 pizzas last night? And I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah. And he's like,
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Translate to the person we're speaking to, I think. And I think that's important.
Well, I think it goes back for me to that the power in vulnerability, as you say, when you see someone answer a question openly and honestly, it can kind of, my experience anyway, in trying to do that myself, and I'm not always good at it, but when I am, is that that's kind of reflected back to you. It's like someone maybe is in a place where they feel, oh, thank fuck, I'm in a safe place where I can actually share back how I'm feeling rather than going, I'm fine. Because that's what I always used to do. Because I was terrified that whenever anyone said, how are you? And I was because I was suffered really bad. I still do, but not as frequently, suffered very badly with depression in my early 20s. And I was terrified that if every time I answered, how are you honestly, that no one would ever want to be around me. And that's a hard thing to break down.
Yeah. And
Mm.
where are you at with that conversation now?
Mm.
How do you feel about that now?
I think, as you say, there is sort of a social element where it's not always appropriate. um,
Yeah.
but I have been lucky in the last few years of living with people who have actively encouraged me to do the opposite of what my childhood taught me, which was not to burden anyone with your issues.
Mm.
They've actively encouraged me to say, how are you? No, but how are you? It's I can actually share that space. And it's just kind of the passage of time as well. And we shift, and I've done a lot of work on myself and got sober, which was massive. So the peaks and troughs aren't as violent as they used to be. But they're still there and they still come and go. But I feel like every time, I've said this on the podcast before, but every time I come out of one of those cycles of melancholy or low mood, it's like a little ego death. There's another little chip away of this false self,
Mhm.
that's sort of been chipped away through surrender to, I'm too tired to keep this up. And so I sort of see them as learning experiences now. It's hard to view them as that in the moment, but that's kind of how I see them, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes
Yeah.
complete sense. And I
Mm.
think there's something too about becoming okay with uh your message not being for everyone, in the way
Mm-hmm.
that you might say to someone, no, but how are you? And they might go, that guy is so pretentious, or he's so sort of annoying, or he's so sort of, he's trying to have a deep conversation with me, blah, blah, blah. But
Mm.
they're viewing you at the level at which they can view you right now.
Yeah.
And I think that was important for me, was because I found it, I still find just conversation in general quite difficult, quite awkward. I
The
find
amount
it,
of prep we've done for this, voicing
yeah,
us
yeah,
back
no,
and forth.
genuinely. I know. And I find it all, because there's such a chaotic element to conversation. And I think too, I find working out the level at which you're having the conversation, I found difficult, especially growing up, because it made me feel so good when people were completely honest. And so then you go, I don't know if you go through a period where you go, okay, honesty's the thing, and then you push that sort of honesty scale way too far, and you're actually just opening up to people or expressing ideas to people that really, I don't want to put too much of a word on it, but don't deserve it, or you shouldn't yet. And then you learn about how to manage your energy in a lot of ways, how to, for me anyway, I learned how, and I'm still learning how to engage with people on the level that they are willing to engage, as opposed to grabbing someone who doesn't want to be in a introspective conversation and go, come and talk to me down in pits of sadness right now. No, if you want to stay on the surface, which is where I spend most of my time anyway, let's have that chat, and we can have that chat. But you'll come across the occasional person who will meet you at your level, and I think if that happens all the time, then it loses how special that actually is. And I think you were talking about grief in terms of people in your life, and maybe even romantically. And I think both romantically and in friendships, I've found that the really great connections are very rare, and they should be, because they are utterly, and they have value, and valuable things are rarer.
Yeah. Have you ever read any of Brené Brown's work?
I haven't read her work, but I've seen her speak quite a lot.
Yeah, because she talks a lot about what you were just talking about. There's a difference between being vulnerable and oversharing. You wouldn't, she says kind of the difference of someone who you're vaguely acquainted with at a party going, "How are you?" And you go, "Well," and then you just, split. Or when like true vulnerability, as you say, with those few special people in your life, and it doesn't have to be with someone you're close with, but in those moments, that's kind of a gift, you being vulnerable with someone, I think, when you judge it right, and when you know it's someone who can receive that. But it's interesting, it made me think when you were talking of this question of kind of, we use, I think in Britain, the term wanky a lot to kind of describe emotions we're very uncomfortable with, and topics we're very uncomfortable with.
It's a precursor to actually, I might say something I deeply mean right now.
Yeah. I might show my true feelings right now. But it's interesting because I know you've shared with me that you are very interested. I think you've done a little bit of directing anyway, but in the future, it's a real kind of thing you want to do. And I guess, how do you combat that in a rehearsal room or as an ensemble of fostering, fostering a sense of open, interested vulnerability? That's our buzzword for I'm just going to call the episode vulnerability.
Yeah. Wanky of you.
Yeah. Wanky vulnerability. Because I think that's important. Vulnerability is important within any creative process. So how do you personally, in your life and in your work, get past that kind of term wanky? I keep getting called soft boy as well. That's another thing people keep calling me, and I'm like, well, I guess I am.
I know. Yeah, I mean, that term in itself is shrouded in all sorts of I think that term, which has not been my experience of you, but it's alluding to some form of faux vulnerability in order to get some response, right? And it's always going to be that, and we all are on a narcissistic spectrum of some kind, and anyone who thinks they're not is probably the furthest down the line. And I think, so there will always be narcissistic elements of everything, even this conversation, and that's fine. But I think, back to your question on how do you do that? One, I don't know, but what I've seen is that my instinct tells me that so much of it, if you're a director, is about who you invite into the room, because it only takes one person to send it up, or to judge, for the entire room to float back up to the surface and go, oh yeah, no, I don't feel comfortable. And but then it also only takes one person to sink so far that the room then starts to feel uncomfortable in a different way. And I'm thinking about people and hearing about people who have worked with, let's say, actors who a real example that people love to bring up is this staying in character all the time thing, or what people refer to as the method, but we both know that's not what that is, but let's call it that. And so, because I think people feel that that becomes quite selfish as well, and that becomes self-absorbed in a way that makes you feel not involved or makes you feel judged. And so it really is it's like creating a great sports team, or it's like creating a great orchestra, or even a piece of music, is that it only takes one note to change the whole dynamic of everything that you're working on. And but then and then I think ultimately you have to be brave, and you have to I've found that on everything that I've worked on, I've managed to become a tiny bit braver in what it is I actually feel, and what it is, when I say I would love to direct, but there's like a long way down the line when I actually feel I have something to say. But I want to, even on a film and television set, I think something that would be really nice is to connect with people every morning, get everyone together and connect with what you're working on for the day, and what your intention is, for a bit like when we spoke about the intention of this conversation is, what question are we trying to solve today? And not just, and again, there's so many variables, because some people are just going to be there because they're trying to pay their rent. That's probably the most honorable reason that anyone's got. And then some people are going to be there because they are so deeply connected with this piece that they've taken a giant pay cut, for example. Or so you've got loads of different, and you don't want to be dragging anyone anywhere they don't want to go, but I think you can lightly offer up the space for people to just, sometimes you're working on something, and you'll do a scene where it's just a family chatting around a table, and it's very much centered around exposition, and everyone comes in and you shoot it and it's all good. And then you might be shooting the death of a loved one, and it has the same feel on set, and you go, in my head anyway, I start to feel strange, because we're dealing with the death of someone. And how do you navigate that without everyone because it's a workplace too. And so sorry, you're now getting an insight into my head as I try and deal with
exactly what we want.
Questions. The 500 things in my head dragging me left and right, because it's a place of work. And do you just set, how do you, everyone has different boundaries, and everyone has different parameters in which they work, because I know I would love for it to the room should feel like someone's died in it. For me personally, I just feel, if that's what we're conveying on a screen, we're giving voice to someone who's experienced death. And so to watch it should feel like it is to live it, which is horrendous. Then also there's people there who are, who might actually be not able to open themselves up to that right now, and it might not help their job. And so I guess I just try and find it for myself. But I know when I direct, I would love for the set to have the feeling and the rhythm of the question that we're exploring for that day.
I think it sounds like we come from a similar place in our view to acting, because you go to that question of wanky and method and all that stuff. I take my job very, very seriously, because I think you're portraying another human life, whether that's a fictional life or another one. And if someone was playing me, I'd want them to do more than turn up and have learnt the lines, to be honest. So I take it very seriously, and that does involve, I think, some techniques. In fact, most of my prep outside of the rehearsal room could be described as method. As you say, it's not, but but it's what people think of as method.
For anyone who isn't like a trained actor listening, method was coined by Stanislavski, right? It was his method, which essentially is 7 key questions. Is if we're
Hmm.
boiling it down to like
Yeah.
layman terms, which is like who are you, where are you, whatever, and not whatever, really vital questions, but I won't go through all of them. And I think we've now so to perform the method or to use the method is to really just ground yourself in
Truth.
imaginary
Yeah. Yeah.
circumstances. And now it's become this thing of, oh, he actually went and dug up a mine himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like, if you want to do that 100%, but
Fine. Yeah.
in terms of language, the specificity of what we're saying is it if you're pretending to be someone else in a way, you are using the method.
Yeah. Mm.
And so yeah, sorry.
But the term wanky goes very well with this because I don't do it. I don't bring it into rehearsal rooms because of fear of, putting anyone else out. And it's something that I struggle with in my head because one of my favorite actors, one of the original actors who kind of made me think I really want to fucking do this, was Daniel Day-Lewis, who is famously what people consider method. He stays in character throughout the whole process, including on set. And that can cause issues for people on set. They have to, when he played Christy Brown, they had to lift his wheelchair over the cables and stuff. And
Yeah.
it is a question I think about sometimes, how much I always keep it's my process, and it informs everything I do, but I never bring it into the room. And I'm not sure. But then again, if I was in Daniel Day-Lewis's position, if I was a fairly well-regarded actor, I probably, maybe I would, because I think it would help me.
Yeah, that was my next question was do you think you would produce better work if you weren't so polite?
I think it would, on a of my limited experience of TV and film sets, it would help in a TV or a film, just because of the way it works, because of concentration. I think it would keep me concentrated and not. I think I'd have a tendency of being in a trailer for 5 hours to kind of watch Netflix and all that, and staying in character would help me be at work basically. In theater, I don't think it would help because that really is an ensemble process, I think. And that's what I love about theater, is you're kind of building this world together. You're not just a little cog in a big machine.
Yeah.
And I think you need to bring some of yourself, not just the character, to that process personally. But I don't know. I've never tried it with theater. I just don't think it. I think maybe that's one reason Daniel Day-Lewis stopped doing theater, was because that the way he works, just you can't sustain that for 8 shows a week.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think I'm yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that. And really it's like the central question is, can you where is the line that you cross where you because for me I think I know the line is that as soon as you start to impinge on someone else, if you make someone else's job more difficult,
Mm.
then I think that a line has been crossed. But I think uh, that line can be negotiated in ways that are so much simpler than people even really allow it to be. No one on a film set is trying to get in your way, and no one's trying to make your job harder, trying to. They might by accident, but you can then say to someone, it's very easy to have a conversation where you just say, I regularly do it with people when we're working. Of maybe if it's on this current job, I'm working with like the most amazing hair and makeup person, and I'll often just say to her, tomorrow's gonna be a heavy day, so
Mm. Yeah,
I
yeah.
might not talk tomorrow because
Mm.
the scene is going to be a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we won't talk. Obviously, we'll talk, but I might just be a bit more quiet. And also understanding that if you're not an actor, you don't know that for free, that that's what it
Mm.
is. So you could come in and I can be a very sensitive person. And if someone's suddenly a lot more quiet with me, I might go, oh, have I done something?
Mm.
And so it's easy to just go to just say, just so you know, tomorrow I might be a little bit more solitary. I hope it's
Yeah.
okay with you, and if it's nothing to do with you, and I'm not annoyed or in a bad mood or anything, it's just a heavy scene, and
Yeah.
just that sorted, and then you don't have to worry about it, and you can go about your work. But I know what you mean, because it is a really difficult one to navigate, because for me, I have no idea what my sort of process is, but it's definitely just whatever it takes, really, to just what you need to get, and
Yeah.
that's it.
I think it's a good question that you asked of, do you think it would help you? Because I do think part of my reluctance to do it is a fear that it's from my, middle class English upbringing of you're polite and you're this, and I don't want to be the person in the corner. But communication is key, and anyone who's a half decent person would understand that. There's something that we spoke about via voice message that I'm very interested in the moment, interested in at the moment with the character I'm playing, which is if you work in this sort of way, which is a very, I don't know, I find the way I prepare for roles kind of, it does encompass my life somewhat in the time I'm doing it. And a question I think I'm interested in is, should you be fully healed from an emotion or a situation before you use it as a tool to get into character? Because I'm noticing there's a lot of things that I can relate to within this character that I have gone through. And I think when I was at drama school and earlier in my career, if you can call it a career, I would just kind of throw myself completely into it for the art and fuck everything else, and just I'd get off on that. And actually, I'm realizing that, and I still haven't figured out how to do it, but you do need a separation between character and person, and it's hard to show when it's a part that has some very deep or troubling themes to it. It's hard to shake off, and it does stay with you no matter how much you try and separate from it. Kate Fleetwood said something that I loved once, which was your body doesn't know you're lying to it. I thought that was a great phrase.
That's true.
Mm.
Yeah. What do you mean and think about being fully healed? What does that mean?
I think it's a very good question, because do you ever fully heal from things? Everything leaves a mark. I think having processed it to a point where it won't engender a sort of trauma response, like you can't be. I think when I did the rehearse reading for this play, it came out of nowhere. This just like the floodgates kind of opened, and it worked, thankfully. But it was, I'd never had anything like that with acting before. It kind of was like, oh, that really was me. Which maybe is good, but I think, as you say, it's a job, and you have to be in control in some
So,
ways.
I mean, I think it's my instinct is to say that it's, and with everything that I say, it's each to their own, in the way that so some people view it as a job, and some people, I don't. I don't see it as a job. If I wanted a job,
Yeah.
I'm fairly disciplined. I could have gone to university and actually got a proper job and get paid way more consistently.
Yeah.
Somewhere to go every day and have
Mm.
regularity and all those things. And so I personally don't see it as a job. And my experience has, I think about great musicians, and how many great pieces of music would we have lost if people had waited for themselves to
So
be
true.
processed before they wrote the
Yeah.
song? Because it
Yeah.
would be all these songs about, like, you know, the remembering their heartbreak, as opposed
Yeah.
to being in the middle of it. And that's why I think there's no hard and fast rule. I'm thinking right now of an experience I had that was really one of the most fundamental experiences of that I've had as an actor, because I'm fairly certain I got into acting from a really I mean, we all do, but for like fairly selfish reasons of just wanting to be heard and seen
Mm-hmm.
in a way. wanting attention and wanting people to see me and things. And so when I went to drama school, I was really contending with that, and I was like, I'm basically just training to continue my attention seekingness, right? And this is not good because I don't need a degree to certify I'm good at this because I'm already PhD.
Yeah.
Not
I've
good.
mastered this already.
Everyone's enabling this. And so I was trying to work out a way of it not being that. And it goes back to what we spoke to at the beginning of this conversation, which was, can you reframe, the destination is what it is, but can you reframe your reasoning for walking the path? And I managed to, in a way, by when I left drama school, not really doing any acting for like a year and a half, 2 years. And in that point, and there was also like a pandemic and things. In that point, contending with a lot of the reasons why I did what I did. And by throwing it away and by not doing it, I was able to re-find it from a place of necessity and from a place of needing to express things, needing to explore certain things. And I did a play last year where I played a character who was very much like me as an 11, 12-year-old. And he was sort of 13. It was on stage, and he was incredibly anxious, and he was incredibly lost in terms of what he should do. He didn't feel like he could make the right decisions. And this is from like a performance point of view, but I've always been a really nervous performer, just so nervous. And that comes from that sort of attention seeking mixed with self-consciousness, all those kind of things. And I was doing this play, and again, I was just so nervous. And then on the press night, I think, the morning of the press night, I got some really bad personal news that was just really crushing to me at the time. It's crumbling. And I, for the first time in my life, couldn't wait to go on stage. And so I was standing in the wings where I usually feel sick, and to go on. And now I feel sick standing in them and can't wait to get on stage. And of course, that show was like 5 to 10 minutes longer than it normally is. I'm just hovering around, just trying
make the most of this.
Just not wanting to leave the stage, because I felt such a freedom there, and it was my life that I was kind of avoiding. And again, I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's healthy or unhealthy, or what healthy even means, or what to process something even means. We're so good with language that we are able to give words to things that we don't understand the meaning of, and we just bypass what it means because we can get to a stage where we intellectualize it. And I don't know if that was healthy or not, but my whole experience of performance changed then, because I felt so liberated, and I felt so lucky to have a place where I could exercise these emotions. The play was about, in my personal life, I lost something that was really dear to me. And in the final beat of the show, I have to run across the stage and say to my sister, please don't leave me, because I was about to lose something that was really dear to me. And I had to confront what that was. And I was almost, and there's all these ideas of it shouldn't be therapy, or it shouldn't be this, or it shouldn't be that. And I don't know what it should and shouldn't be, but I know what it was.
I think that's bullshit, personally. That's my stance.
Can you imagine telling, who writes really heartbreaking songs? I don't know.
Nick Drake.
Okay, great example. Imagine trying to tell someone like that, oh no, you shouldn't, you need to protect yourself here. You need to and I understand the sentiment, but it's really, what you're dealing with isn't something that can be safely put in a box. If it's really touching something primal and central to what it is to be a human being, if it is so easy to compartmentalize, then I'm not sure you're really touching the depths of it.
This this is a hard question to answer, but have you figured out what it is that makes you want to be an actor? Because we talk about therapy, and the reason I say that's bullshit, and I also understand the sentiment, but I
Mm.
think the reason theatre, which is kind of where acting started, was it was a form of catharsis for the audience and everyone involved, and that is one of I've had to try and figure out, and I'm still not fully there, but
Mm.
why I want to be an actor, because it was just my complete identity when I was at LAMDA, and then
Why
when
did you
I
get into it? You know, what,
mm,
because how did you get to the point where it was your identity?
mm, I think it wasn't my identity until I got to LAMDA, weirdly. So
Uh-huh.
so it was quite a pure thing I'd done from a very early age. It's always kind of what I'd done.
Mm.
And then I got to LAMDA and suddenly started getting, I had so little self-esteem and started to get, pats on the back from people
Yeah.
about stuff I was doing. And then it became, oh, well, this is the answer then. This is the way out.
Not to pseudo therapize you, but I'm just curious because it might enlighten something in my own life of
Mm,
so there was validation there. There was
validation. Yeah. It was basically, oh, I have something to give, and this is it. And I felt, and I still do suffer with social anxiety somewhat, but it was crippling back then. And so I felt very uncomfortable at drama school with socializing and being around some very confident and outgoing people.
yeah, me too.
And yeah, and I just felt so uncomfortable that I just mostly stay at home,
Yeah.
and all that. But it was like, oh, this when it came to second year performances and stuff, I would put my whole life would be about that, and then for one night I'd be cool to people
Mm.
because people would be interested to talk to me after the show. And if I'd done less than my best, my day would be ruined. I mean, it's so fucked up thinking about it now, but I was messed up at that time, really. And I think I've had to, and I'm still not fully there, but I think the reason I act, one of them is catharsis. Two is just from a pure place of joy. It's the one thing I know I'm good at. I don't have to. I find life quite confusing. I don't find acting confusing. Especially being in a theater, everything within that world makes sense to me. I know how it works. I know my part in it. Um, but there is part of it that's therapy as well. And I'm finding it with this part. I think it's hard at the moment being in it, but it's making me okay. This is quite a vulnerable admission, but I have made an attempt on my life years ago. It's a long time ago, but my friend in this play kills themselves, and so I've been looking into kind of grief of those bereaved by suicide quite in depth. I've been to SOBS meetings, which is survivors of the bereavement of suicide. I've been reading books, all this stuff, and it has shifted my perspective of that, and sort of I used to, in a fucked up way, think that that was my way out. That was my fail safe if everything got too bad. And one thing, you say it's not therapy. Well, it's therapy to me because I'm going to come out of this process seeing the other side of that. And it's completely changed my view on that subject.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I really appreciate, like you said, the what vulnerability can do for other people. And I think perhaps maybe just from thinking about it as we're talking about it, that the form itself is neutral in the way that it's like a guitar. It's just there,
Mhm.
and you can pick it up and smash it.
Yeah. What you do with it is your decision.
You can use it as a table if you like. Put a plate on it with
That's a
coloring.
fantastic metaphor. I
You
like that.
pick up and play a happy song or a sad song or anything. And who are we to say to anyone else what that thing is? And it is what it is for you. And I know
Mm,
what it is for me in a way that I'm not sure I could conceptualize, but if
mm,
that's what it is for you, and then it requires, like you said, it hasn't been an easy road for you to get to this place where that's what it is for you, because it does require certain conversations with yourself, and you don't want to get really far down the road and realize that why you're doing it or what it is for you isn't serving you anymore. But I know for me that it feels like it's something similar to you, where it's in so many ways I completely identify with what you've said, because me and a really close friend of mine had this discussion a long time ago, and my opinion of it has changed since. But I really was talking to him about at the time films like Wes Anderson's films, or films that create a real world that's definitive and has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and gives you answers, and is complete, and is like a closed circuit that you can live in, and you know the beginning, middle, and the end, and there's like a safety to it in a way.
Yeah.
And that I love, and I love that about performing at the time, because what I was drawn towards order, because I was so filled with like inner chaos. And then he was the opposite. He liked films that ended with that leave you with more questions than. And now I'm the same. Now I love that, but it's because I'm more resolved in myself in terms of inner chaos, and so it shifted what it is for me, and what I think about it shifts all the time. That's kind of why I wanted to have this conversation too, was because I'm in no means at the end of some sort of road where I feel like I can stand on a soapbox and tell people what the answers are. But it would be cool. It is very cool to keep a record of like of where your thoughts were at certain points, and allow yourself to look back and go, like you did just now, with where your experience of being in third year and getting like amazing parts, but then also if it didn't go right, you were sort of really gutted with yourself, and it would ruin your day, and you look back and you go, wow. And it's like opening up a journal and seeing, oh my gosh, that day I just berated myself for something, and now I feel totally differently, and maybe in a few years time you'll find you'll be back, not back, but you'll have gone forward, and you'll have different expectations on yourself, because everything's kind of always evolving and changing. I know for me right now that acting, or being an artist as it were, is something akin to being an explorer who, because you said something, and this goes back to what music and pieces of art can be for people, in the way that an explorer, back when we had like loads of undiscovered countries to still hammer which we still do in terms of his undiscovered country, but for us to like go across the horizon and come back and tell people what's there takes real bravery and courage, and you have to overcome so much, because I've been in periods of my life where I am not able to engage with grief. I'm not able to really feel my feelings entirely, and that's like 99% of the world, because you'll start failing your exams, you'll drop out of school, you'll lose your job, whatever. And so you can't, it's not possible, because it will ruin the structure of life. And that's, for so many people, the way it is. And so if you can go to a theater, or for me, it was a movie theater, and sit down and see someone go there, they're at 100% a lot of the time in their grief, or they're in the story they're telling. And just through osmosis, you get to exercise some of that in a way where you can still go back to your life. So in that way, there's artists can be sort of emotional explorers who are coming back and letting us live in a small way, in a way that we can manage, without having to, potentially throw our lives apart, which is why a lot of artists' lives are really chaotic, and things that best enjoyed from the outside
from a distance.
Don't go near them. They're dangerous, horrible,
fucking mental. Do you consider acting an art form?
Yes.
Mhm. Expand.
I definitely do. Uh, yeah, I think I do. I mean, it kind of depends. Is all acting art? Who am I to say? But I know that I think it's an art form. But in the way that I think anything can really be an art form, there's so many ways to, even if you're tidying your room, you can do it in an artistic, sort of conscious, thoughtful, intention-based way, or you can just do it whilst listening to music and not really engaging with it. And so for me, I definitely think it is. I think it's so funny because I was in a fury last night reading David Mamet's book. I love going through it because makes me contend so much with what I think, in the way that you don't really, ideas in your head, they haven't come into friction with the real world. So until something has collided with something else,
Yeah.
you don't have an idea really.
No. And it's also like a lot of our ideas are just other people's ideas, as much as we
Oh,
wouldn't want to admit it, you know?
oh, of course, and they should be, and
Yeah,
maybe
of course.
add like a tiny little bit of another idea, and then two ideas stuck together, an original, somewhat an original idea. But I think in his book he talks a lot about this, how much extra stuff actors put on things and how it's so much more simple than it can be or whatever. But I think even in small ways you can express something of yourself, or we're expressing what it is to be a human being.
Hmm.
And that in itself is enough to be an art form for me,
Yeah.
definitely. What do
Hmm.
you think?
It's a tough one for me. I think I used to be very cynical and say immediately no.
Hmm?
But actually, I think, and then I kind of got to this place where I thought, well, I think when it's done incredibly well, when you see Daniel Day-Lewis on screen, or I've seen a few stage productions. I saw the Layman trilogy, and I thought Simon Russell Beale, I thought that was art and stuff like that. However, it's a difficult one because I do write as well, and I write music and I write poetry and things like that. And with every other art form, so songwriting, poetry writing, I can clearly see a similarity with the creative process. Whereas, and you can do that on your own. You can create a poem, you can write a song. You can't really act on your own. It's just masturbation, really. Otherwise, it's just, if you're
Yeah,
alone in your room doing a monologue,
yeah,
is it art? Probably not.
yeah.
It's a difficult one. I still don't know the answer. It's why I ask it, because it's an interpretive art form, I guess. The art has kind of the world's been written down for you. It's your job to inhabit it, which is why I think possibly, and I haven't worked in telly and film enough to make an assumption about this, but I feel like possibly theatre is more creative because you are, as an ensemble, actively discussing and trying to create this world together. Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think so much of what you said is bang on. Do you see, when there's like great pieces of music that people do their versions of throughout the years, in terms of like different covers of different songs, etc. I see those as art. I see
Mm.
when someone takes lyrics and makes it into a different song. The rhythms of it and everything are different. I see that as art. I go, wow, that's a really cool
Mm.
um version of that song. And I guess it is it is a version in a way, but there's so much originality in it. And I see that the same as acting is, it wouldn't be an art form if everyone who picked up the script did the same thing every time
Mm.
they did it. Maybe that wouldn't be an art form. But the fact that and it's interesting you say art when you see it. And I think that's true. But, and this might just be true of great writers, but there's no versions of Hamlet that are the same.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's no there's but and I'm sure directors and casting directors see it all the time, is that people come in and give very different interpretations of the same thing. And so there's something
Yeah. There's
there's
something
something
creative
happening
about it.
between the words on a page
Mhm.
and the person meeting them, and that space in between, there's
Yeah.
originality there. There's creativity there, definitely.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I always ask myself it's a similar question about kind of is a dancer a creative? Because technically it's an
Hmm.
interpretive form, isn't it? But it's how you interpret the music, and I think there's a similarity between acting and dance in some ways. Um, I am leaning more towards that acting is an art form because I do feel the way I work and the way I prepare, I feel it's creative, and I think you're right. The fact that 10 different people can pick up the same script and do 10 different things with it. But it's just interesting that sort of very few other art forms. It's the act of creation has kind of already been laid down, and then it's your job to bring it to life, I guess. But it's a very interesting observation about kind of covers of songs, because I think this is a subjective thing, but when I hear, for instance, Jeff Buckley's cover of Hallelujah,
There you go.
it's an entirely different song,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
an entirely different mood, and
mm,
that I would agree that is art. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
It's funny for me because I see it um in s- in the same way that a song seems to exist somewhere that the songwriter has to sit down continually and find.
Mm.
I do believe that it exists somewhere and they are sort of finding it, and they're sort of taking steps towards it. That's how I feel about characters. And
Mm.
the thing that I become more and more interested in that is really like a sort of magic trick or like a mystery to me is that writers can often write characters without fully knowing what they've written in a way where and I mean that in the biggest as the
Mm.
biggest compliment in the sense of they sometimes create a like a 10-headed monster without really realizing
Yeah.
how amazing the character they've written is, because a lot they might just be thinking of it from a different way of you might say to them, why do I say that line? And they go, and some writers who are really technical might give you a truthful honest answer, which is I just need it for this because it's antagonistic towards this.
Mm.
I need this part of the scene to be about this. You go, okay, but as an actor you go away and you're threading this line of the whole character. You're just focusing on one part of this giant machine. You're having to make it all make sense. And when you're adding all those lines, you've got all the dots, but the way you connect those dots is completely up to you.
Yeah. And unique to you. Mm.
Everyone will have a different
Yeah.
interpretation because, I had an experience on the character I'm playing now where I was on a plane flying back in between doing some filming, and I basically was writing something down, and I realized, oh, this character is me, and
It's
I've been working on it for like 4 months, and I
always a
went,
terrifying moment, isn't it?
yeah, I was like, oh no, oh
Oh
no, I'm
no.
doing me again.
I'm doing me again.
And halfway through every single rehearsal process, I finally, this is the one. This
Yeah.
one isn't me. This
Mm.
is definitely not me. And then oh no, I've done
Oh
me.
shit. Yeah.
And it was in the way that he he grapples so much with the idea of success and the idea um of he feels he can never truly be who he wants to be or who he actually naturally is, and so he's created a version of himself that's like palatable and a version of himself that can achieve the goal that he thinks he wants, that will lead to his sort of salvation. And really, in some strange way, he needs neither the person he created nor the goal that he seeks. He just wants to be himself.
Mm.
And I was like, oh no, that's me.
Yeah.
And that, that and another actor would take that part and see it totally differently.
Mm.
And that I think is definitely art.
I think a good example of something I think is definitely art as an actor would be um Mark Rylance's Rooster Byron in Jerusalem. I mean, that I can't imagine Jez Butterworth ever pictured
Yeah.
something like that, something that is such a juggernaut, and where he's almost I don't know. It's almost like it's hard to do that play without violence now, isn't it? It's a bit,
Yeah.
yeah. If you don't mind sharing with me, I'm interested in knowing, kind of, since you've graduated LAMDA, um, how have, it doesn't have to be just within the industry, but how have the tough things that have happened, the events that have kind of shaped, how have they shaped your approach to your career and as a person, I suppose? Just because, and sorry, I'm gonna start that question again because I've not, and I'm gonna change it slightly. So, since you've graduated, the work you've done as an actor, how has that changed how you view what you want to do going forward? Because I always think in my third year I had this idea of the exact kind of actor I wanted to be, the kind of work I wanted to do, and then you get out into the big bad world and industry and you start doing work, and that your concept of what you want to do changes and shifts. Has that been the case for you as well?
Yeah,
Yeah.
massive.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, we were talking before about it being the form, the form being the form, in the way that acting is one way of expressing something you're going through, or one way of expressing anything, but really the journey is you as the person. And I think that's what that is the biggest difficulty when you go to somewhere like LAMDA, is you become an actor in the
Yeah.
way that you're no longer the guy at school who does acting, or the person at school who does acting. You're now, oh, this is my friend, he's an actor.
Yeah. Stan the actor, Dan the
Yeah.
actor.
And
Yeah.
the ego loves it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh
Oh,
gosh, this
loves
is
to identify with something, doesn't it? The
yeah,
ego.
this is correct. And you become, yeah, you become an actor. And I think for me, the biggest thing about leaving LAMDA was losing that. And it was, I didn't work for yeah, it was like 2 years after leaving drama school, which is still by my metric not that long. But it felt long, and I'm sure I'll have periods of longer, after this or in the future. But it's kind of losing all of that. And you said before that, you could have finished drama school having done Macbeth and signed with a great agent and gone on to do shows. And it really could have been the worst thing that ever happened to you, because it doesn't indicate, and it doesn't require or make you contend with anything internal
No.
when you're just taking steps forward externally. It really actually can often do the opposite, especially in acting. If you're contending with issues about your who you are or who you want to be, or the only real way through that is some form of struggle and proving to yourself who you are in really difficult moments. And not only are you not struggling, you're you're being put up in a hotel, you're being picked up in
Driven to say in a
yeah, yeah,
Mercedes.
yeah, you're being fed. You're like a child.
Yeah, it's so
and
true.
and you can, like, people can request ridiculous things and they'll say
Yeah.
yes. And you're in this strange world of you're being infantilized. And I didn't have that experience leaving drama school. I had gone to drama school when I was 18, did drama school, it all went well. I mean, I loved it so much, and then left, and yeah, nothing. And it was through that I learned to not identify solely as an actor, and learn and just had to, and I still go through this now, where acting is part of the way that I express myself and something I really enjoy doing. But the bigger journey is the personal one.
Yeah.
And if you're going through personal experience to make yourself a better actor, that's the wrong way around.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
not the wrong way around, it's just the wrong way of thinking about it. It's like you are a person who is experiencing things, and that's why I think it can help to think of yourself as an artist, because then you're not bound by the form.
I
I'm
couldn't
sure
agree more.
I don't know how you had that experience. You're saying you're into music. Was there a period where you were like, well, I can't do music because I'm an actor?
Well, actually, it was interesting because I think the start of my journey into letting go of the identity as an actor was music, because I had missed performing so much. I mean, I worked immediately out of drama school and then didn't work for 9 months, which doesn't seem that long, but I've done quite small scale work and stuff. I haven't had the big agent and stuff. So I've kind of built very much from the ground up, and things like that. But I got back into, I miss being on stage. And what do I love? I love music. So I started performing live, and that was like, oh, acting's not the only thing that makes me happy. And that was a very small start. But it's very interesting. I couldn't agree more with what you said. And it was very interesting when the pandemic hit. Some of the most miserable people I spoke to were very successful actors
You didn't
who,
have the tools.
no, because they'd gone straight from drama school and not stopped working. And so you don't have to look at yourself if
Yeah.
and you sort of sometimes don't have time to look at yourself
And I
if you're,
think so many things of that, like I am so glad that people do that and they do go on to work, because it's everything you ever wish for. But in a way, that's their journey then, is
yeah,
that you gain everything you ever wanted to realize that none of it, that's not what you really wanted in the first place, maybe. But for us, or for other people, the journey is finding, is actually not having to go through that. You then have to contend with yourself and so many other things, that you develop all these tools, all these experiences of struggle, and all these experiences of having to go, well, who am I if I'm not an actor? And I had the similar experience during the pandemic, where it was a really, other than I wasn't personally affected by death through COVID. And so for me, on a personal level, it was a very peaceful time, because it was an extension of what I'd been through, but then also I got to really experience life without feeling like I'm missing out on something, and
yeah.
without, like, I'm not working as an actor.
I've
And
spoken to so many. I mean, Mikey said that, and so many actors have expressed that they suddenly the pressure was off because we weren't comparing ourselves to everyone else because everyone was in the same boat.
that's always there,
Yeah,
to regardless of pandemic or not.
exactly.
It's actually
Hmm.
always
Possible.
there to sink into, as opposed to jump up and grab.
Hmm. Completely. Yeah. Talking of Mikey, so I spoke to Mikey and I don't know what this means, but he just said the fruit.
Mm.
So I want you to go into the fruit with me, please, Stanley Morgan.
My gosh. I'd love to.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. When I left drama school, I was at the end of LAMDA. I actually went through I can't really describe what it was or where it came from, but I really, like, burnt all of, the phrase of, if you want to take the island, you got to burn the boats that you came
Just,
on. I kind of did that, in the sense of, I left LAMDA, I moved out into a flat on my own, in kind of like the middle of nowhere. And Mikey, who was my best friend, he went back, and I had many best friends at the time, but he was one of them. And he went back to America. A few of my other best friends moved away, and I split up with the person I was seeing at the time. And I was basically just like, I had nothing. And I don't know why I did it still, but I'm so glad that I did. But it was kind of the worst year of my life, because I wasn't acting, I wasn't doing anything, and everything I identified myself as and validated myself with went. And all of the crutches I used to plug the holes of myself were gone. And so me and Mikey would have these long conversations on the phone, because he is one of, like, probably the most amazing person on the planet, but one of a handful of people that I'm so lucky to know that are so special.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky to say I have quite a few of them in my life. But we reframed the way we thought about struggle, and the way we thought about bad moments, was because when you're someone at LAMDA as an actor, the ways you identify are, you can become quite business oriented in the way that you're thinking about industry, in inverted commas. Okay, so I'm an actor, and the more jobs I do and the more successful I become, the more famous I become, the better I am as a person.
I think LAMDA in particular, sorry to interrupt, but I think LAMDA
Right.
in particular, from my experience of people that went to Bristol Old Vic and places like that, I think LAMDA particularly don't help their students with that in the third year, in my opinion.
For me, the focus should just all be being on an artist, because that's a
Yeah.
transferable skill. And yeah, so that was kind of that. We were contending with that because none of that was happening for us. And so we were like, oh gosh. And we would speak and we started to talk about, you know, the real, at the darkest moments, the moments where, I'm on the phone just sort of sobbing to him for the 100th time that week. Like, mate, everything I built my life on is gone. And I don't know. I feel like a kid starting all over. And he would go, yeah, but this is the fruit of life. He was like, this is the experiences that you're going to learn the most from, and these are the moments that bear the best things.
Yeah.
And from these moments, the seeds of things are born. And he was entirely right. And I was furious that he was right because I was so certain.
Fucking wisdom is annoying sometimes,
Oh,
isn't it? Especially when you're in a pit of
oh my
self-pity.
God, it's so annoying
The
because
last thing you want to hear.
because I was like, no, 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 there's no way you can be right because I feel so awful. It was basic. And looking back on it now, because we still use that phrase, we just say, oh, it's the fruit, a great heartbreak, a great,
Yeah.
a real, standing up on the edge of the cliff and go, oh my God, it's all over. This is just like the worst moment of my life. And now we almost seek those moments in a way. Maybe not that we seek them, but we definitely don't avoid them, because that's our relationship to it, is that they're the moments that we should strive for, because to have one of those also means the inverse. And so to me, it means that you're living in the seat of life, as
Yeah.
opposed to sitting and watching cars going by, having all these experiences going, oh, that looks awfully dangerous. And it's like, it is all quite dangerous and scary, like a date or a romantic situation is incredibly scary because it's so unpredictable, and it's the same as an audition or a great piece of work. And you come back, you go, oh, mate, I said this and I did this and I why I did it. He goes, that's the fruit, like this struggle, this pit of whatever the feeling is, are the moments of greatest revelation and reveal so much to you about yourself.
Yeah. That's amazing. And it kind of goes back a little bit to what I said earlier about kind of each depressive episode I come through feels like another little it's like you're getting closer to your authentic self every time you go through one of these moments in a way. And I think that's really what we should all aim for, is kind of this authentic version of ourselves where all our both the dark and the light within us are integrated, kind of what Jung says with the shadow and all that, integrating the shadow. Yeah.
If for your head to be in heaven, your feet have to be in hell or something.
Completely. There's no light without the dark. You wouldn't see it. So before we get into our weekly segments, which I rather enjoy, I just want to ask you one more question, which is and I'm going to try and not come at this because I feel I get on my high horse a little bit about this, so I don't want to come here with this. But how would you define or describe professionalism as an actor? Because it's something that really fucks me off when I see let's say self-entitled actors who seem to, I don't know, it annoys, no discipline and no care for the people you're working with annoys the shit out of me, basically.
Yeah, I understand the frustration, and I have felt it from time to time. And I think ultimately I try and look at it through a lens of understanding, as some people really haven't had to, and I mean this in like the most amazing way. Some people have been really lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, that discipline they've never had to enforce discipline to stop themselves falling into places where they might not come out of, and or to get them out of places where they might not come out of. Because I've definitely felt that of periods of my life where if I didn't invoke discipline, I don't know if I definitely wouldn't be here. I don't mean alive on this earth. I just mean I wouldn't be able to have this conversation. I could have really gone down a different path with things. So sometimes that's why I was saying I'm so grateful for, especially my interactions with forms of addiction, where I realize what undisciplined, I don't want to use that word too much in terms of addiction, because that ascribes some form of like blame and, oh, you could just be disciplined and fix it. I don't think that, but I can see what an unstructured, unobserved life can lead to. And it really scared me and still scares me a lot now. So that's just the way I came from it. But I also have sort of so much self-doubt. And I look at people who can turn up to a set, barely learn the lines, don't really know the story, and still do it as if they're things. And I just wouldn't be able to. I'd be sweating, I'd be like confused, I'd be all up in my head. And I have to do so much just to get there and feel like I'm honoring something and feel like I really feel like you understand that. But for some people it does make them better. If the goal is to make the best piece of work you can and to tell the story, for some people that's the way they can do it, is that by not engaging with the material and by not inhibiting themselves, in air quotes, with research and things like that, they feel they're better. And I think ultimately it's, you said the word concentration earlier, and I think it's all about, Stanislavski knew a thing or two about acting, and it was concentration and relaxation. Both of those to me are just, if you can't get those, then any work you've done is useless. But I would prefer to be on sets where it wasn't so casual, and there was a feeling of rigor and a feeling of just, it was that thing earlier. Sometimes you're sat down having a chat, and then you go into a room and someone passes away on camera, and you're like, oh, we were just having a chat about, what people can have for lunch and stuff, and it just feels, I don't know, just for me it doesn't work. I'm not able to shift it. I guess the flow of emotion through my body is thicker than other people's. Some people can just flow straight through it. For me, it's like a bigger gear shift. It's like trying to turn a barge around. But yeah, I would love for there to be more rigor, more for it to be more okay with people really going for it and caring about it. Because there is that phrase, we're not saving lives. And it's true, you're not on the front lines in a war like a lot of my family have been. You're not working in A&E like my mum did. But that doesn't mean that you then should just like not do anything. And that doesn't mean then that you shouldn't take it seriously at all, because that's another inverted version of comparison is the thief of joy, which it is. And just because you're not on the front line doesn't mean you shouldn't take your job seriously. And you said that. And I think there's an extra line of, you can take the job seriously without taking yourself too seriously. And that's like the best, because I think no one really knows what Daniel Day-Lewis's process is. Nor does he. But
it's become a myth, hasn't it? More than anything.
Yeah, it really has. And I think I love people who can do it all with a slight wink, can go there and be there. But it's all in the thing of, I'm doing this because this is the best way I can do my job. But I'm not gonna think that I am saving lives. But you can just do your job to the best of your ability and put everything you can into it, and that's enough.
Yeah, and it's one reason that I don't use much of her stuff in my preparation, but I was really influenced by Uta Hagen, just how much
Yeah.
detail she
Oh,
puts into this craft, art, whatever you want to call it. But
yeah.
it's like musicians aren't saving lives, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't be called a wanker for practicing for 6 hours a day as a musician, and taking it seriously.
It would become it's there is an interesting mythology, and when we choose to mythologize and when we don't,
Mm,
because a pianist who sits at a piano for 9 hours a day, they're a genius.
a virtuoso, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. And Daniel Day-Lewis is a genius because he is.
mm,
He's the best actor I've seen.
mm,
Not to be cliche, but Brando's there as well.
yeah.
Those names are cliches for a reason,
Mm.
and they have very different approaches. But I think, yeah, what were you going to say? Because I just saw you.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was about to go on a rant about people that sort of say, "Oh, I don't think Daniel Day-Lewis is that great,"
Yeah,
because he is, yeah, he is. Um, I get if it's a taste thing. I know a lot of people prefer very kind of still naturalistic actors, but I find he finds naturalism in the biggest emotions, and that's very fucking hard to do. It doesn't matter how big something is as long as it's truthful. And I think that's kind of what annoys me, what people say about him, that it's over the top. It's like it's not. There is no level of falsity in what he's portraying.
I don't know what naturalistic means, but I know that when I've watched him, I've never felt for a moment that there isn't a living, breathing human being.
Completely. Yeah.
I feel that with John Bernthal, who I think is an
Mm.
amazing actor. Jeremy Strong's obviously fantastic, but
Yeah.
there's never a moment where you feel like you're not seeing a
No.
person. And Uta Hagen, for me, just on the base level of, she requires a lot from the people she works with,
Yeah.
and that I really like. I grew up in sports, and I grew up with this rigor, and that 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 was that was the thing I was thinking about. Was there's a lot of times you're on a set and people go, oh, I only read my scenes, or I haven't even read the film, and everyone like sort of giggles together, or yeah, I was up all night getting hammered and now I'm here.
Mm.
And if you played for Real Madrid and your central midfielder came in and said, I was out till 6 a.m. last night,
Mm.
and you were about to play in the Champions League final, you'd be raging.
Yeah.
And if they said, oh yeah, I didn't really train this week, you'd be furious. And that's how I see it. It just go,
Mm.
oh, okay. Well, now I feel sad because I feel like we're not all pulling together.
It almost dumbs down the thing we're trying to create as a group.
Hmm.
And I agree. And just on a personal level, I mean, it's a defect of mine, but I beat myself up so much that I can't. I beat myself up even when I'm not being lazy. So the thought of actively being lazy and going and getting hammered until 3 and then turning up to set having not read the script just fundamentally makes me feel queasy. Like I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you
Yeah.
mean. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there are people who, like they say Eden Hazard never trained and when he played for Chelsea, but he was amazing on the day. And there are some people like that who that's part of their sort of creative chaos
Mm,
is that. Um, but just for me on a personal level, that's not how I approach things.
yeah, same. Mm. What is your art of the week, Stanley Morgan? A piece of art that you have heard, seen, listened to that has moved you this week.
I might share it with you.
Go on. Yeah.
My granny sent me a poem.
Oh,
I don't even know
fantastic.
if it's a poem. It's a reading.
Mm,
That I was really. We were talking a lot, me and my granny, and she ended up sending me a reading on grief,
mm,
and um, I was really sort of moved by it because she hadn't really shared it with anyone else. But she said, "I
Did she
feel."
write this or
No,
no? No.
no. She'd been given it at church.
Mm,
My granny is the most amazing woman on the planet. Um, she is both um the sort of matriarch of our family and encompasses, all of those things of what that is, like to be a
mm,
leader, to be the head of a family, has so many children, grandchildren, whatever, and but also has it's very rare that you find both the softness in someone where they can give everything of themselves to other people. She's the most selfless person I've ever met, but she can also lead a family. And
mm.
invoke discipline when it needs to be invoked, you know.
True leaders. It's a real
Yeah.
rare thing. It really is. And
To
something not to be sniffed at, you know. I think
no,
it's a
yeah,
real quality that we don't talk about enough is leadership. Mm.
absolutely. And it's to hold, you know, to hold a child with enough strength to keep them protected and held upright, but not too much that you sort of, you know,
Yeah,
uh,
coddle them that they
coddle
can't be
them and squash
self-sufficient.
them. Yeah,
Hmm.
and exactly.
Hmm.
And that's what she does. And so when she shared this with me, I was really, really moved. And so I just wanted to share it with you now. It's just a short little reading on grief, but it goes on what we were talking about earlier. And so yeah, it's by Cardinal Basil Hume on grief. And it says, grief cannot be shared, for it is mine alone. Grief is a dying within me, a great emptiness, a frightening void. It is loneliness, a sickening sorrow at night, on awakening a terrible dread. Another's words do not help. A reasoned argument explains too little for having tried too much. Silence is the best response to another's grief. Not the silence that's a pause in speech, awkward and unwanted, but one that unites heart to heart. Love, speaking in silence, is the way into the void of another's grief. The best of all love comes silently, and slowly too, to soften the pain of grief and to begin to dispel the sadness.
That's beautiful.
There's
I
more in that, but that
mhm.
the rest of it is more tied to God. So I kind of want to leave it there.
Yeah. No,
You
fair
aren't
enough. Yeah.
religious, but it's a pretty amazing.
Yeah. I love the thing of the greatest form of love is silence almost. It's like what we're talking about of leaving that space. I think there's a power in just leaving a space for someone to be vulnerable if they want to be.
Absolutely,
Powerful
and
thing.
not forcing it, and also not you know not minding if it's not there. But
Yeah, completely. Yeah. Just leaving space. There's space here if you're ready, kind of thing. I think that's
yeah,
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 absolutely. My art of the week, I th I've got a few options, and I think because we listened to a little meditation beforehand, I'm going to choose Confessions by David Whyte. Confessions is a collection of, I guess, short readings with a poetic bent to them because he's an Irish American poet. They're on the Waking Up app. It's also in book form. But he does the most beautiful one I think is it's about a 9-minute reading on friendship. And I can't remember. I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but there's it's basically that true friendship is the act of witnessing and constant forgiveness. We forgive each other constantly and are there to witness each other's fuck ups. And that's for me one of the most beautiful things about true friendship is witnessing the progression of someone and see them deal with the challenges and be there to witness it, but they have to go through it themselves. It's beautiful, and he's got it on everything: love, isolation, all these things. That it's a fantastic collection. So Consolations by David Whyte.
it takes bravery to allow someone to change because you
Mm.
leave the door open for them to also change away from you.
So true. Yeah, yeah.
Difficult
Mm.
because sometimes you're kind of like, yeah, I would love if you change to be more like me.
Yeah.
But
And it's I
yeah,
I guess it shows the sign of true friendship because often it's not to say that this is a bad thing, but friendships that are born out of a certain situation or a
yeah,
certain point in time are fixed in that time or situation. And
yeah.
the ones that are malleable and can flow with the flow of life are the ones that you never lose, really.
Yeah, because they're not tied to a specific place or a specific belief. It's like, oh, I can only be friends with you if you continue to love this thing or
Yeah.
this, and that's not, the phrase like warts and all,
Hmm.
that thing of like I
Yeah.
love you for the warts and all. It's almost like the opposite, not warts and all, but like warts are all.
Yeah.
It's like,
Warts because.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
because of the yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the reason that I sort of I love you, and I think that's a nice idea.
I found it a lot when I quit drinking, actually. The friendships that sort of that were really acquaintances based on us getting pissed together, sort of thing. And when you're no longer that person, it's hard to keep those. And I lost a few, which was an interesting thing. Artist spotlight of the week, Stan. If there's one artist you think people should know about, who would it be?
There's so many.
Yeah.
Luckily,
You can choose a few, honestly.
luckily one's already been on this show. So Mikey,
Mikey
he's already
DeFillipis.
been on here.
Yeah.
I can't say anything that you won't think yourself if you just listen to the episode with you. If you just listen to that, you'll get that was such a gift for me to have that, because I now don't need to tell my friends about this amazing person that I know.
Yeah.
I can just send them that episode and just say,
Glad
just
to be
listen
of
to
service.
yeah. And I can say, just listen to this. And this was the person that I lived with for 3 years at drama school.
Yeah.
The person I speak to every day.
He's a special person. It's I've never found, because me and Mikey haven't had that many conversations. We haven't, we were always friendly at drama school and I saw him around, but we were never close. We've never technically been close. Yet there's a connection and an immediate understanding there that when I went to New York and stayed with him recently, we could have stayed up talking for 5 hours and lost track of the time. And I have not really found something like that before. So he's a very special, person.
Incredibly special. He's someone that everyone should, keep a track on, in terms of anything he produces will penetrate you sort of spiritually and emotionally on a level where I know that everything he creates comes with such depth, and that's kind of what I'm drawn to. I was drawn to him as an artist before we really became friends. We lived together, but I didn't really know him, and then I saw him perform and was like, every piece of work he did was so detailed, but also full of so much spirit. And it was something that I saw that made me want to get up and act. And so to then
what a gift, what a fucking gift that is. That's
the biggest gift. And
it
then
rarely happens, but seeing him, yeah,
and I get to speak to him every day, and we get to it was like, it really is amazing. So he's one. Another one I would say, I've got three I just want to quickly touch on.
Yeah, of course.
Gilbert Kyem Jr., Gilbert Chem Jr. is my best friend. I mean, he is like one of 5 people who are like my brothers, Mikey being one of them. There's a few others. And he's like my business partner, and we work together, and he is an actor and a performer who I think, and as a person, he stands by so many things that I really respect and admire. And to be in his presence is to elevate yourself to a version of yourself that you love, because you have to, in order to. It's kind of like Mikey is like, you like the person you are when you're around them, because the level of integrity and depth they bring to conversation is a level that requires you to be in a certain place, and that for me is euphoric. And then there's 2 others. My granny, I would say, is like the best painter artist I know. She introduced me to what art is, and I've already touched on her, but she's the most lovely woman. And I share her artwork on my Instagram. My Instagram is like promoting other people.
Well, because I put in the episode notes, I always put that. Shall I just put Stan's granny, or would she be okay with her full name?
Can you put Lalley? Right, Llallie, and then in brackets you can put Gabrielle Morgan. But that's what we call her Lalley, and her paintings are amazing. And in my flat in my house, I only have one piece of artwork on the wall, and it's her painting of the Berlin Gap, and it's beautiful.
Amazing.
And then the last person I talk about is, if there's any actors listening, the person who, if you're struggling with your work, or if you feel like you're at a certain block with your work, email Lawrence Mitchell and speak to him. And he's someone who has been like a mentor to me, has been like an artistic best friend to me, has been a best friend to every character I've ever made. He knows them all, and he loves them all, and I love them all. And he's one of the greatest acting practitioners and teachers and tutors I've ever come across, because similar to anyone I've just listed, Gilbert, Mikey, so much expertise with no ego. It's
Yeah.
the most incredible balance. So yeah, and what about you, mate, for this?
Fantastic. So my artist spotlight of the week, I'm gonna go for one that needs so much, this unknown person, Leonard Cohen. I'm gonna go.
Finally,
Finally,
someone
someone's giving a
appreciated the
show.
light.
But the reason being, I was gonna choose it for my art of the week, but I've been reading The Flame, which is his final collection of poetry that he wrote when he was dying, and he was confined to. He wrote this poetry collection and recorded his final album, all while confined to a chair in his room, basically. And both pieces are just the way he deals with the oncoming mortality that he's about to face. Is there's a song from his final album that opens it called "You Want It Darker," and he was religious. He was a Jewish man and practiced Judaism, and it's him talking to his God, and it's like a hymn. It's like a Hebrew hymn. It's unbelievable. He says, I don't know what it means. I did used to know what it means, but the chorus goes "Ineni, Ineni," which is something in Hebrew, and then he just says, "I'm ready, my Lord." But it's also this struggle that, so it's the chorus is that, but the first verse is like his struggles with God, and kind of he goes, if you are the healer, it means I'm broken and lame. If thine is the glory, then mine must be the shame. You want it darker, we kill the flame. He's just as a wordsmith, there's very few people better, and I know I should probably shout out more unknowns, but he's moved me this week, so I'm going to choose Leonard Cohen.
Yeah.
Hmm. One thing you are grateful for this week, Stan?
This conversation, I would say.
Hey, I'm glad.
Yeah, I just think to get to talk about things that you're actually aligned with and you care about, especially as an actor, you don't always get to even say words that you feel aligned with. And so I feel conversations like these I'm really grateful for. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that, because and I'm going to go for the same thing, because I felt your hesitancy initially, and you expressed that very well, and you were very thoughtful in what you wanted to get out of this conversation, and I'm glad you came on, because I think it has been a wonderful conversation, and yeah, so I'm also grateful for this. Do you have, there can be more than one, but as everyone on this podcast knows, my artistic role model is Bob Dylan. Do you have an artistic role model, someone that has influenced you and is the sort of artist you would like to be, ideally?
Oh,
Tough one, right?
that one's really hard, and
Yeah.
it's always changing, because I feel like maybe I'm a sort of patchwork quilt of many people sewn together. Daniel Day-Lewis is definitely on there.
Great.
The only reason I wouldn't say him is because of what that means to other people as a result, in the sense of, oh, that means he must feel like this or do like that. I just love his work. To watch him on screen, like you said, I feel like I've seen magic. There's a lot of acting that you see. There's a lot of it going on at the minute. I think Matthew McFadden's doing it in Succession,
Oh God.
where
He's
you watch
so
actors and you think, oh, okay, I know how they've done that. I could have done that. I don't know
no.
him.
Yeah.
I
He's stunning to watch, Matthew McFadden in Succession.
he's just every choice. I go, well, how's he? Why that?
And the thing is, he's almost doing nothing as well. It's all internal. You can almost see all the work he's done internally, and then can just be there, and and you read it. It's magic.
It really feels that way. It feels like a magic trick. And for someone, we've watched so much acting, we've studied acting, and so you get quite good at identifying, oh yeah, I know what that is, quite quickly. With him, he also is the least sort of sentimental actor I've ever seen. And same with Daniel Day-Lewis. There's not a moment where they are in engaged in their feelings in the way that's what they're trying to achieve is feeling. At no point do you see the actor go, yes, I'm crying. You just see a person trying not to engage with their feelings, which I think for me is really,
that's the exciting thing, isn't it? That's the thing. The seeing the crying is never interesting. It's seeing someone try to hold back tears is interesting, because that's what we do in real life, really.
Absolutely. So yeah, I guess my artistic role model are all the people, you know, Kate Blanchett does it every time she acts, is that anyone who makes it feel like a magic trick to someone who's to people in the magic circle. when we're all sat around going, no idea how they've
the
done
magician doesn't know your trick.
There you go.
You've done completely. That's a great way of putting it. I like that. And finally, what does it mean to you to be an artist, or what do you admire most in the artists that have influenced you?
To me, it means I think my experience of art has always been that it requires you to operate in a certain way, or it's always required me to align myself and operate in a way that is always a version of myself that I love, and a version that it requires space, and it requires consciousness, and it requires presence and thoughtfulness and reflectiveness to create something that's going to, because we were saying earlier about you're not saving lives, and that is true, but my life has definitely been saved by films entirely. All my best friends were growing up were, you know, from Forrest Gump to Rocky Balboa to all these, and every boxer you meet has watched Rocky at some key point in their life, and that gave them a life. And the amount of times I'd go into school with after school, I'd be wearing a different jacket because I'm trying to be like this person or that person. And it was like having Al Pacino was my friend growing up. Way of like, I'm just going to go and be like Al was in this.
Just going to shout, I trusted you, Fredo, at people.
People that because I'm an Italian gangster. And people don't understand that if they come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding, that's what it was like. So yeah, to be an artist is to make people feel seen and give and feel heard and give and rep and to to shine light on an experience that someone else can feel less alone by is what I would say is what art is to me.
Beautiful. I also, because we've touched on it a few times, I just want to say something about that phrase. We're not saving lives. No, we're not saving lives. However, I always give the example of the pandemic. When everyone was locked in their house, the government at that time was putting out adverts of a ballet dancer saying maybe her next job could be in tech, basically trying to draw people away from pursuing artistic industries. And yet, if you had taken away every bit of art, all Netflix, no TV shows, no films, no books, no music, none of that, the world would have imploded and gone insane, because that's all we were doing. So, no, we're not saving lives, but a society without art is a society with no soul, in my opinion.
I agree.
Is there anything you would like to promote, Stanley Morgan?
No.
Good man.
Forget all that.
Forget all that shit.
If it's worth seeing or worth engaging with, you'll find it.
Amazing.
Find its way to you. Yeah.
Stanley, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for agreeing to do this, mate. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your honesty and your openness and your consciousness.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.